Tene da tanda jirdu jinambala nadu deli hyugiyan la tene teji so tanda tujundu tangaranzo dojin chungtu me sonde dengi yore la dojin chungtu me sonde te tachi tanga sonde tung yimbala tene tin sepa po te pengaran jambal zangbo re la pengaran jambal zangbo ke tanda tene konge jang namso semoto se tene pe jang chula so chenpo ji yaba ti ula reji yaba ta tena la konge shaja chenpo lo jobji la gomne tene topa chepar chi nye tene tela tene sonde dupa te sungwaran sepa rela sonde dupa te sungwaran sepa yinpe chena konge shaja chenpo tan jitinga ondo sena lo jobji la gombe ke tanda nyamnyo tambi chuchi ondo sena lo jobji la gombe chenlap chepar chi yinpe chena tene doji chungto me sonde te ngaransu shaja chenpo nyamlin namke la pe kar chenpo nangi yore la tene ti sonde te nang kapsa la semayin pa tene shaja chenpo ngonto nyambar yo ne dana yung da zawe lama tong jipe lama tong che la tepa tong mugu chi ne solwa tab na yung rong te ta tuk ma yin pe ngon ne sonde te naro chi shu chi.
Good morning, everyone. As usual, we will be reciting the... Oh, that's... Good morning, everyone. As usual, we will be reciting the Vajradhara lineage prayer. And this is a short prayer that was composed by Pengar Champal Sampo. Pengar Champal Sampo was a master who went to a lake called the Semado Lake in the Sky Lake, Semado Lake in northern Tibet. This is a very large lake, and in the middle of this lake there is a mountain, an island mountain. And Pengar Champal Sampo spent 18 years meditating, doing Mahamudra meditation on this island. As a result of which he really developed excellent and wonderful realization within his being. And after he developed that realization, he composed this short prayer. And so, in terms of for Mahamudra, if we look at it in worldly terms, then it is the result of 18 years of experience. And if we look at it in Dharma terms, it is the result of the blessings that come from this, the great blessings, the wonderful blessings that come from this extraordinary meditation. And so this is a prayer that all of us who meditate upon Mahamudra consider very important. So it's very important as we recite this prayer that we do not let our minds be distracted. So whether you recite this prayer while resting in a state of Mahamudra, or whether you recite this prayer while filled with devotion for the root and lineage lamas, please recite it without letting your mind be distracted. Doje chanje delo naroda marba mila jeje gambo
Tene ta tanda chaja chimbo kaume take nang la ta cherdo tene Jonang Jetsin Taranatha ke song na hine je take tong long tong ke take namba ni song yo are la te nang ne ta hine je take la mikoro chuchi ye pa te shu sembare Tene ta te je so huang tong ke te te sung ze pa re la huang tong ke te la mi tin dai sung ze pa re la te na ne mi tin dang bo te ta ka sen shu sen pa re la te rin ta ta rin mi ti ni pa ne shu ju re la tene ta te shu kap su tanda chitang ke Tuto Chimbo Thangtong Gyalpo ke Sungpe ke Dangwa Tenzo Yina ya Rong Tana Chongdong Jetsin Taranatha ke Sungpe Dangwa Tenzo Yina ya Rong te che Nguni Ngaranzo ta Kanang to Kor ni Shaja Chimbo Gombe Kap Sala Nguni Pensanto ga Teni Hine Gombe Kap la Yina ya Mikur Riri Yendola Teni Songlo Tang na Ta Ngaranzo Kap Kap la Tene ta singe la sopege 띵엔zen제 parchi인라고 된대야 용기 요래 갑갑라 농도 터럭 똑반라고 된대야 용기 요래라 드니 딘데 용근 두가 디 용그 갑슬라 디징이 동 parchi 디 살웨게 탑 칸데 고산도 세나 다 콘남베기 냠냠그 때니 소와인 비쳤나 베 펜토 쳔보 용기 요래라 드니 디 펜토 쳔보 요래 디 소수기 냠네 나오 갑슬라 드니 칸데 쟁인다보다 parchi인다보 칸데 용근도 디 살웨게 탑라 드니 당마 칸데 낭도 덴조 살보로 자이니 냠스 뇽나 베 응은이게 데니 타르바동 탐진 쳔베 롱라 팅킹게 롱단다보 베 야보 용기 요아레라 데니 덴조라 갈쳔보 지바다 데니 데겐도 단다 혼통 검비 갑슬라 이나야 다 덴조라 믹살게 펜토 쳔보 덴데 송 요아레라 데니 덴조라 베 단다 미코르 덴조라 살보르 지기 Teni teya rangin senjin tamji la pembek chato yen sombe kumhon nambar tapa saltab ne sen naru che.
Within these instructions on the Amulet Mahamudra, if we look at it in terms of how Taranatha divides it into sections, there are instructions on tranquility meditation and instructions on insight meditation. And of these two, there were 11 subjects of focus about the tranquility meditation, which we discussed the other day. And today we are talking about the instructions on insight meditation. And so for insight meditation, there are 7 different subjects of focus. And of these 7 different subjects of focus, we have completed the discussion of the first subject of focus. So today we will be starting from the second. So whether we're talking about the instructions of Thangtong Gyalpo, or whether we're talking about the instructions of the Jonang Jetsun Taranatha, these are really instructions that if we turn our attention inwards and do the meditation of Mahamudra, these are instructions that are really extremely important and extremely helpful for us. The instructions on tranquility meditation are something that we can really think about and we can look at. Because each of us, when we are doing our meditation, we all have the experience of having the problems and obstacles, the problems of torpor and agitation arising. We have many different sorts of obstacles that happen in our meditation. There are the problems of the coarse thoughts and of the subtle thoughts, and when we realize, oh, these things happen. These obstacles come up to me, and so what methods can I use to dispel these obstacles? And here, these methods are taught to us in terms of the author's own experience. They're telling us from their own experience, and so for that reason, these are instructions that are really extremely helpful for us. And so, in terms of ourselves, for our own individual minds, when we are following these instructions, then we do have these problems that happen. And so, for this reason, now if we look at these instructions and say, well, what do these instructions say? And then we see how it is we experience them. Then this is something that, then if we do it that way, then these instructions really become something that can lead us down the path to liberation and omniscience. So we should really consider these instructions to be very important for that reason. And so here, when we are following these instructions on insight meditation, these are really something that can be particularly beneficial for us. And so for that reason, we should really think that we are studying the 7 subjects of focus on insight meditation for our own benefit and also for the benefit of all other sentient beings. And so please keep that motivation in mind as you listen to these instructions.
Tene ta te la ta tanda tal hong tong ngui ye la meeting dan ye pe na ne meeting tongbo te sen jing wo cho la Senjungo the Candido Tawarella, the Kasinga Gaps Hubare. Tataringa Gaps Hubate, Huyatela, Tene, Tanda, meeting Denganani, Nipati, Jengola Solwa, Sungi Varela. Tanipa Jengola Solwa, Tene, Tachetang, Semjungo, the Rangingi, Tombare. Tomba re de yinayong tomba senkin te pentong ta nongkhan rabo che yina tene tomba yinba la ngo pembo yinba tene namto rabo ta sarchan rabo kanya meba tene pembo yindu tela yenten peli aga namba rabo kanya yo mare tene semje ngo tomba te taba mare tene tomba ngo te salware Salwa sedu tene tanda hipi ki cha, tene cheyang chardo runga, tene cheyang tondo runga, chay yepa re la, tene te imbe cherna, tene ta tanda tene cheyenga andu tadu te la, Sem Tomi te kona la te ne ta te Tomi jengo to nyambar ya te ngo la te ne jengo te mezi pe takpa temba yen do kam jengo se pe jimi jomi yen do kam se ta te ge ngo la ta ga kapsala jewa tang ga pa te ne me pa takpa tang temba yen do kam sun du te la ta jetang ge sem je nonsul trubi ku cha la ma yinba sem je nesul temba yinba cherna teni ngo tomba re la ngo tomba la teni ponjur ge njunya tende yo ma re takpa tang temba yen do kam ti cherna tanda uma yen tomba tawa la tene rikom dewar ki bikin bo te ngo te njurwa me pe takwa yinba la song yo re la tene te rikom dewar ki bikin bo sinkin te ya ta pe buk drabu je la yo pa mayin par tene tanda senje nelu ku ngo te rong chong yo re la senje nelu ku ngo te tomba yinba cherna te takwa tang temba ku ngo ta bu je la takwa tang temba tene ngo tomba yina tela njurwa yung hiya yo mare matap number la temba yo mare la junsin teacher na takwa ta temba hin do kham jengo sepe jing me ba hin do kham se du tne kap ka la ngo tne ta te jengo sepe jimi jomi hin do kham te yapo je ta chi se na 다 띵오 동바 임비처나 딱바당 템바이 따바게라 고고게 와레 쟁거 세나 제대로 제긴 제인도 다텔라 쟁거 세긴도 나 간디지니 쟁거 세긴도 동보 간디지 제긴도 네나 제대로 네 카도도 입수 제다보 진호 고난도 카도도 입지 남발라 간딘도 진호 고난도 동보 제나 간디 제긴도 간디 제긴도 제두 ngo khandi chegendo ngo na chetar ngo hi khepto tapana nguzum me pala kheti bikur ni ba o songna ta chengo kanya me pa ngo rang hin ki tomba yimba ta tinde ga ngo je la zigu gi ore so
Of the 7 different subjects of focus, the first of these subjects of focus on insight meditation is looking for the essence of the mind. That is what we talked about yesterday. So today we are starting with the second, looking for arising and ceasing. So looking for arising and ceasing. After you look at the thought-free thatness of mind. So first we are looking at the essence of mind. The essence of mind is empty, but that emptiness, is that emptiness a material or an inanimate emptiness? If it were an inanimate emptiness, it would be like the emptiness of sky. Sky is empty. but it is essentially by nature material. It does not have any thoughts. It cannot have any clarity. It is material. And so for that reason, it's inanimate material. And so for that reason, there is no possibility for the qualities to develop within that. But the empty essence of the mind is not like that. The empty essence of the mind has the aspect of clarity. That means that there's an aspect of knowing in the mind. So anything at all can appear in the mind. Anything the mind can see, anything at all. And so for that reason, so for that reason, it is not just nothing at all. It is not blank, a blank, inanimate emptiness. And so after you look at that thought-free essence of mind, is it something permanent and stable that does not arise or cease at all? Is it nothing at all that arises or ceases? And so when we are looking at that thought-free essence of mind, and we see that looking at the essence of that mind, is it something permanent and stable that does not arise or cease at all? So when you say, is it permanent or stable, what we are looking at is we are not looking at how we have confused appearances. We're not looking at that. We're looking at the way the mind itself is. We're looking at how the mind itself abides. And when we look at it, we see that it has an empty essence. Because it has an empty essence, it does not change. There is nothing there that can change. If we talk about this in terms of the Shantong or other empty view, then in that we would call this the Buddha nature, that is the family and the potential. And when we talk about that in the Shantong view, we will often say that that is unchanging and permanent. And so when we talk about this unchanging and permanent Buddha nature that is our potential and family, then sometimes it sounds like this is something that is deep inside, hidden deep inside of us. But that is not how it is, actually. Actually, it's just the essence of our mind. It is right there in the essence of the mind. And the essence of that is empty. And because that essence of that is empty, it is what we say that it is permanent and stable. Because it is because the essence is empty, there is nothing in it that can change in any way. So when we say that it's permanent and stable, that just means that we can't find anything that is changing in there. So in that way, we are looking to see, is it permanent, something permanent and stable that does not arise or cease at all? Or is it nothing at all that arises and ceases? So is there something there that arises in the mind? If it arises, how does it arise? How does it stay when it's arisen? What is it like? Does it cease? How does it cease? And so we really have to look carefully at this. So when we look carefully at this, we see that the essence of the mind is empty. And because it is empty, therefore it is permanent and stable. But if it arises and ceases, how does it arise? We look at the mind and see, does it arise? How does it happen? And if it arises, how does it arise? If it stays, how does it stay? What are its color, shape, and so forth? Is it outside or inside? So we look at the essence of the mind. When it happens, when the mind happens, where does it come from? What color does it have? What shape does it have? Where is it? And we look at it. And if it ceases, how does it cease? And so we look at this. And if you examine these and the other issues closely, they will still into identifiability. So we will look at this. And when we look at this, there is nothing that we can find. We cannot find anything there. And so in this way, the essence is empty. It is unidentifiable. And so we really need to look right at this essence.
Tate mikuri ipate jengo la tsolware jengo jenji re jengo mepaji re yakpo ta hinji ne tawa ta sumbate yunhon la tsolware la yurjin noa tate sem la sarchayo are la sarchayo pa la tene ta tanda chitang mei nawa na che lu yi che number hi pa chu yepala tene tene megi yoldo zouton navi yoldo dratu nai yoldo tetsor je yoldo ronyon luji yoldo rizanyon semje ngondo tene hizi gi chuchi namba natso panchar ta tende yungi yore la te nane ta tanda megi zouton na Zut lamer tonga te ngo chetarando ta Zut lamer tonga te la ngo chetarando ta te yon sem ririk totorunde che kam ta te zut te kangaran so ga yeb chen namba la zut ta yeb chen namba to kadu ka namba la tongi yore la te kandi chen tonga do te zut chen namba la tonga te ta sem ririk tur sin sem salvo tonking sem da che yulje zubje nambala herwan da che kom tati ngo chibare tadi re che par chendo hebte che par chendo hebte che te la tachi yapochi sigu gre te la tachi si sinkite ngune jipa gone tachi sepa mai par Teka la tani kandi semtang yul ni de jay rindu kat tadi rindu yakpo tagu kare teni tanda ngaranso tu sampe jipa ke samna teni nangi hipa te tang chi yul ni tate pare chi yul pempo dudrup ke namba imba jay tang nangi hipa ti hipa sari ke namba tabu ji re te nguni nyamsu nyoni tawe kapsu la sen la hyarwe nongwa je re mato tele losu churba yo ma re la teacher na tatanda chirul jint nongwa de nang sen la hyargi yo re tene chirul jint nongwa de nang sen la hyardu tene chirul jint nongwa le losu churba sen mepa je dang sem le losu churba chirul jint nongwa mepa tawe je ta kali gomni nyamsu nyona tetabaji yungi yore la tetabu hebtu chi se ta tseke ondo se na tene tanda ripieta jipa ka ripieta chi sepa na yinti yore de yena ya jipa ka ripieta chi sepa ma yinpa ngune tingen sen gomni nyamsu nyong te nyong ka tu ne kandi rindu tawa che la koge yore ta te yenda nawe datu pa la so pa la jarte sopu kone karire se na na ita tsurwa che ro nyongwa luji reza nyongwa tene yeji yodo churbe chuge namba kharwa tenji ge namba kharwa la so pa la jarte mikur sumba osa.
So that was the second subject of focus, the looking for arising and ceasing. And so we look to see whether there is arising or ceasing, or whether there is not arising and ceasing. And so we examine this and we really look at it very carefully. The third subject of focus is looking for appearances of objects. So here, looking for appearances of objects, we are looking to see what the appearances of objects are like. So when we look at it, the mind has this clarity. And because there is this clarity in the mind, then there are the six consciousnesses, the eye consciousness that will perceive form, the ear consciousness that perceives sound, the nose consciousness that perceives scent, the tongue consciousness that perceives taste, the body consciousness that perceives touch, and the mind consciousness that perceives knowable phenomena in a generalized way. So there are these six things, and so it seems like there are these six different eye form that appears to the eye, and so forth. So when you look at it, when your eyes see form, look at what is the essence of clearly seeing form. So we look at it and we see what is the essence of this. What is it really like? What is the essence of the clear seeing form? So when we look at the form, the form, we clearly see it. And when we clearly see this form, how is it that we see the form? We see a shape, we see a color, we see all these different aspects of form, but how is it that we actually see them? So we look at these to see what are they like. Is this the same as or different from this very aware and awake, this very aware and clear mind? And so there is our mind, and there is the appearance of the form. And are the essences of these the same, or are they different? We need to examine this very carefully. So we need to really look very carefully. And when we say examine this carefully, then this doesn't mean that we are using inference to do it. This means that we're looking right at it. We're looking directly at it. And so we're looking to see, are the mind and the object that we're perceiving, are these the same, or are they different? So we really need to look carefully for that. Now, if we were doing this, when we think about things in terms of our studying and we're using inference, then we would generally say that, well, the appearances, the objects that appear and the mind have to be separate. Because the external objects that we see are material and they're composed of particles. The internal mind has the nature of clear awareness. So when we're looking at it in terms of inference, it seems that way. But here, that's not what we're doing. We really need to experience it and look at it. So we're trying to experience and look at what it is. And when we do experience and look at the mind, then there are these appearances that occur within the mind. But there isn't that much else otherwise. We cannot find anything else. The external appearances just occur in the mind. They do occur in the mind, but if we look for them outside of the appearances of the external mind, external objects, we cannot find any mind. Outside of the internal mind, we cannot find any appearance of external objects. And so when we really are looking at this carefully and slowly and experiencing it, if we meditate upon this gradually, we will come to an actual experience of it. This is what we will experience. So if we look at it carefully, if we look at the words where it says examine carefully whether there is any difference or distinction, it sounds like we might be supposed to be using inference, but that is not what is meant. Here, this is talking about experiencing this within meditation, meditating on it, developing a real experience of what it is. And so then we need to develop this basis of experiences within us. And so we do this with the forms that the eye see. Then it says, do likewise for hearing sound with the ear, and so forth. So when we say so forth, we also mean smelling a scent with the nose, or tasting a flavor with the tongue, feeling a touch with the body, or perceiving a knowable phenomena in a generalized way with a mental consciousness. And so this is the third subject of focus for insight meditation.
De la ta sumba sachi sumba de yunthong la chwa sengkin de ngaran so komsong ke menga tanda chu kun chu chu chaja chim chu kun chu chu da mari men se tenzu ke non de somna non tu de ta sum ke yore la no a chi no la ta ni chi no da nang ge sem ni chi gam tha di ta wa de sum ke yore la de chi nyong ge ten ni ngu sen kawa da bo je la ta ti gam kin chu ge sung ge yore la ta ti ji so mi ko ri yiba te la kare sung ge yore se na nom to la chwa sung ge yore ta ti ngaran so kom song ge thi tham ji ge nang do so na te ne ju tu ne ta wa sung ge yore la nom to njo te ne nam tu njo ge ngona njo tu ne ta wa sung ge yore la te ne te ya ta kam der tanda nam tu la chol wa sung ge yore ta te ya nam tu la chol ge chol te nam tu lam ji char wa da da sen jar wa kin la che par chen do se ta tanda ngaran so nam tu ra pa che che na chodom mon song ge nye mon ba nam tu yin na ya ra nye mon ba mai ba ge number to ba ta ba ji yin na ya ra te che namto je char namto din charwe kapsula tini ti namto te charwa te da senje rangin ni la chepar chendo ti ni je mi ji ta la namto chi pe se chetar che chi ne manga pe kap ye lu khanda yen do ta ti namto te chi pe kapsula khani che gen do khandi si che gen do tini ti ge namto ge rangin te ngo tomba ta ba je yin ba ti nyom su nyong ge wa la chi ne manga pe kap ye lu khanda yen do tanda yi namto te chi ne ye de pe kap la khandi si de do ngo ta na ngo lu chen da yin do hip to ta ti mi ko ri ba yin su ge.
So that is looking for appearances of objects. And when we talk about, and then following that, we have that is looking for the appearances of objects. And in the instructions from the Karma Kagyu, the Karma Kamsen tradition, this is what is called in texts such as pointing out the Dharmakaya, or as in the elimination of ignorance, the darkness of ignorance. This is what is called looking at the mind and appearances. So this is looking to see whether the mind and whether the external appearances are the same or whether they are separate. And this is coming to develop an experience of it. Now, coming to develop this is something that, or coming to really identify this is something that is rather difficult to do, say the meditators. So, that is what they say. So we will move on to the next one. So we'll move on next. Rinpoche didn't say we'll move on. Sorry, that was okay. The fourth subject of focus. I don't know why that was funny. The fourth subject of focus is looking for thoughts. And in the instructions of the Karma Kansan lineage, this is what we call looking for the mind in motion. So when we have thoughts, it seems like the mind is moving, and then we look to see what is the nature of that motion. And so that is what is called looking for the mind in motion in the Karma Kansan instructions. And here it is called looking for thoughts. So what is the distinction between the thoughts that suddenly occur and the nature of the mind? And so there is the sudden occurrence of thought. There are coarse thoughts that appear. There are thoughts of greed, aversion, and delusion that happen. Or there might be thoughts that are other than those. There might be virtuous thoughts that happen. But whatever sort of thought it is, there are thoughts that occur to us. And when the thoughts occur to us, what is the distinction between that thought that occurs and the nature of the mind? We need to look at this carefully. And so we need to examine whether these two are the same or not. So we look to see what is... are these thoughts that occur in the nature of the mind, are these the same or are they different? And so we examine whether these two are the same or not. When thoughts arise, how do they arise? So occasionally thoughts do happen. And when they happen, when they occur, how do they arise? Where do they come from? We look to see what the essence of that thought is. And when we do, we see that the essence of that thought is naturally empty, and we experience that. And then we look to see from the time they have risen until they stop, how are they present? So what is the way that they are present within us? And when they stop, how do they stop? So we examine this carefully. This is the fourth subject of focus.
Tene ta te je so ngabare la ngabati yunho yemi la chepara yunho yemi je chepara la chorwa sungi yore la tene nde ni tanda sumba yunho la chorwa ta ngaba yunho yemi je chepara la chorwa nika ti chitang nongso ne tawanda bola rogi yore chi nawa la tani chi nawa ta nang sem ni chi gam thadi khandi rindu hepto ta hin chi na tene ngo yermi to ro to ngo rang ji tomba la zipa ta tende ji chepar la gogi ware la tene ti la chitang nongso ne tawala sachi sumba yunho la chorwa to sachi ngaba yunho yemi ji chepar la chorwa nimbo ti tanda chipare chikpa re te yinaya tatsul la te si chepara yaware la tini te meke zon tong tuji sen tong mantong tuji sen ni la chepar chendan do ta kondo kandi tagi yore se na chiru zuk chi namba la khardu nang sen tong chiru ji zuk ni kei tong tadi namba la kandi rindu tagi yore tandan de zuk chi namba la tong kap che sen tang zuk chi namba la mantong kap che sen ni la chepar chendan do tagi yore teni te chepar yue na yue lu tu me na me lu chetara yin ta te mi kur nga ba wo
Kondo de tambur de kebre de shira
tanda kondo tanda chiru ji zuk tu nang sen ni te kam ta te pa ta ge yore ba sachi sumbe kap sala sachi nga ba kap sala teni zuk den tong kap ji sen don zuk de mantong kap ji sen ni le chepar
Lasna de kaus de la karsko de simgi ngo ta ne de nijala de simgi ngo ta ne ra shin
Niga la sen jira ngola ta wala jibar ba.
Chipara.
Jibar re te ina ya ti nonsul ke siena. Kondo he pa te zuk namba la khardu, she zuk namba la kharwa te don nang sen ni te kom ta te pa ta ge ware. Tandan de la tanda tse zuk namba la tong kap do mantong kap ni le chepra chepra.
The fifth subject of focus is looking for a difference between the presence and absence of the appearance of objects. So here this is also looking at the mind and appearances. Both the third subject looking for the appearances of objects and the fifth subject looking for a difference between the presence and absence of the appearance of objects. Both of these are what we could call looking at the mind and appearance. So they're similar in looking at the aspect of appearances, but what we are looking at above is we're looking at the external appearances and we're looking at the internal mind to see if they're the same or different. And here we're looking to see whether the mind that perceives, or the mind in which there is appearance and a mind in which there is not appearance, we're looking to see whether these are the same. In one sense, when we look at both of these, they both are in essence seeing the empty essence of mind. But there is a difference in the way that we actually look at the mind. So these are both looking at the mind and appearances, but they are looking at these in different ways. Above in the third section, when we are looking for the appearances of objects, what we are doing is we are saying when there is the appearance of an object before the mind, when that appearance occurs, then is the aspect of that appearance the same as or different from the mind that perceives it? So that is seeing, is the appearance, the image that appears in the mind and the mind, are these two the same or different? That is what we were looking at in the third section on looking for the appearances of objects. Now here in the fifth sections, when we are looking for the difference between the presence and absence of the appearance of objects, we are looking to see, is there a difference between the mind at the time that we are seeing an appearance and the mind at the time that we are not seeing appearance? So at the time that there is a time when the mind is seeing a form, and there are the times when the mind is not seeing a form. And is the mind at these two the same or different? And so if there is a difference between these two, examine the way it is when it is present and absent. So we'd examine the difference between these two. And so this is the fifth subject of focus.
Tene ta teji so yang chupa te kandere se na nam to yemi ji chepar la cholowa re la teya tanda kondo sachi yeba la nam to la cholowa sinkin te ta tanda sachi chupa nam to yemi ji chepar la cholowa sinkin te ni ka njodo de tawa ta chitang sem number to pa 마이와 남도 라파치에 값소 되네 남도 라파치바 대다 디 모데 간디도 따나 남도 라파치에 남반다 보지 요레데 있나요 남도 라파티게 ngo de ranking ki tomba cheyo ma dupa dabo che kando yo mini ba tang aran solo nang to raba hedang nang to dabo ji che na hedang namba de kana che do lu ji chela che do lu ji nang do che do tene tanda lu le tate ba la che do kaba che do ta chi che na tene ta cheyo ma dupa ngo tomba ta ba che to pata to pranjurwa ta ba che imbe cherna tene tanda sachi hibata sachi tupani bote chikpa ndabo che rete yenaya te tatsul ge chepte sachi yore tatsul ge chepra khande yore se na tanda sachi hibka sola namto harwa te da namto mahharwe semje ranghi ile chepra khande do tage yore la sachi tupa te la namto chipe tuji sendong namto machipe tuji senni la zongi dong sal masal tong tong ge chepra yemi lepar ta solthap te yelaung thar miti hipa he njumi se thati ge sachi sumba ta sachi yeba sachi ngaba sachi tupa te thati ge solthap namba ye yore 사치 숨바게 윤홍라 졸와 사치 예바가 남도라 졸와 데네 사치 나바게 윤홍 예미게 제발라 졸와 사치 두바가 남도 예미게 제발라 졸와티 솔타 히알라온 타르 미티 히바게 somna 데네 티게 타두 타 센제 남도라 테나얀다 열제 노알라 테나얀다 ngorangi tombal라 zi바 헤인 종에 대코나니에 대코네 좀 드니티게 냠뇽제 지나 디콘라 좀 그래서 미코르 투바오.
The sixth subject of focus here is looking for a difference between the presence and absence of thought. So here, looking for the difference between the presence and absence of thought. And there's this one, and there's the fourth subject of focus, looking for thoughts. Looking for thoughts. So looking for thoughts and looking for a difference between the presence and absence of thought are both looking at the mind in motion. These are both considered looking at the mind in motion. And in both of these, we're looking at the time when thoughts have not been stilled, when there are coarse thoughts in the mind. And then we are looking at the nature of these coarse thoughts, and we are seeing them. And so in this way, these two different subjects are similar. We look at the nature of the thoughts, we look at how the thoughts appear, and we see that their essence is empty. That their essence is empty. They cannot be proven to be anything. We cannot find them. For example, when we have a thought of anger or a thought of hatred in our mind, well, where does that anger come from? How does it happen? Does it come from somewhere outside our body? Does it come from somewhere inside the body? Is that feeling of anger the same as or separate from the body? What is it like? And when we look at it, then we can see that it is emptiness that cannot be established as anything at all. So in this respect, the fourth subject of focus and the sixth subject of focus are the same. But there's a slight difference in the way that we are looking at the mind. So that we are looking at this. And so how is it that they are different? Well, in the fourth section, which is looking for thoughts, then when we are looking at thoughts, we're looking at the thoughts when they occur. What are they like? So how do the thoughts happen? What are they like? But here in the sixth section, when we're looking for the difference between the presence and absence of a thought, we're looking for the distinction between when a thought is occurring and when a thought is not occurring. So examine carefully whether there is any difference between of good and bad, clear and unclear, empty and not empty, between the mind at a time when a thought has happened and at the time when a thought has not happened. So when there's a thought in the mind and when there is not a thought in the mind, is there any sort of difference of good, bad, clear, unclear, empty and not empty in the mind? And so when we look at the mind in these four ways, eventually the reference point will disintegrate. So when we're looking at the mind in these four ways, and here the four ways are these four different subjects of focus that we've just gone through. The third subject of focus, C, looking for appearances of objects. The fourth subject of focus, D, looking for thoughts. The fifth subject of focus, E, looking for a difference between the presence and absence of the appearance of objects. And sixth subject of focus, F, looking for a difference between the presence and absence of thought. So these are these four different ways that we are looking. And when we are looking in these four ways, eventually the reference point will disintegrate. So we'll have the experience that when we are looking at the thoughts or when we are looking at the objects, we look at the essence of them. And we see that the essence is emptiness, that cannot be established as anything. And we see this, we actually experience that. And when we experience that, so rest within the nature of that. It should actually just be rest within the nature of that, not rest within the nature of thatness. It should just be rest within the nature of that. So this is the sixth subject of focus. And so here we need to come to that experience and we need to maintain that experience.
Tene ta te ji su mi kur dambare la, damba te ta tha je pa na ki, no anda tham ji rang sem su tha ji, chi no te ta tanda, chitang tene khargi yore te inaya te nang rang sem la yimba, sem ji nongcha yimba la tha ji te, ta te yang per na ngarang su tandar lamsong, tene nang sem ji nongcha yimba la ngi hi ji wa te zi kangan rabu yore te, inaya mulam la pe yo na, ta mulam je kap su la radang kangpa la su pa khargi yore, te tenji ondo siya na tene rangi semde tadi tu churpa yuwa ma re. Pe te yendo tanda redang kangpa la sopa nambo khargi yuwa re te ina ya te kana khargi yuwa re siya na rangi semje daindo khar degi yuwa re la. Yunsin teacher na rangi sem su tha chi. Sem la lepar ta pa na nguzung chi yung me pa ta tege ngong la yuwa. Tene sen korang ngo la ta chi siya na sen korang ngo te sachan danan do. Ngo dendren do samba nguni yakpo ji te na nguzung kanya yo mare ngo tongbe namba dabo yo re la teke ngo la te zit na tini teke ngo la nyambar yo tadung mondo tsalwi nguzung me yendo chimi chong mahin par tini nguzung yo mare te nguzung me du te la chiya me pa kanya me pa Pemtong namkha tabuji ribe se na, pemtong namkha tabuji mare, tong yendo natsu so charwa, tene tela semke sarchaga ondo se na yon chardo runga re la, che yorje nongwa ina yon chardo runga re, ritong jene wa, ta rei yendo tombe ngo jene wa, wale chuge wa, shiger nyongwa se ta ti semte, tomba chimi chomi mahimba, pemtong namkha tabu mahimba, tene sarchata jepa, shiger nyongwa, je mihi pa la, je mihi pa tela, chamji gapa te ta te ngola nyambar gapa te mikur dambaye.
Next, we have the seventh subject of focus, determining the nature as the expanse. And in this one, we've already come to real decisive certainty. So, determine all these experiences to be your own mind. So, when we see the occurrence of external objects, and when they appear to our mind, these are just appearances of the appearing aspect of our mind. Now, when I don't think I said that. I'm going to go back. Okay. Okay, determine all these experiences to be your own mind. When we look at our own mind, there are the appearances, there are external appearances that occur to our mind. But these are just the appearing aspect of our own mind. So we can look at it and we can see this directly, but really coming to real certainty about it is a little bit difficult to do. But even though it's difficult, we can actually think about it in terms of an example. The example of a dream. For example, we can have a dream, and in a dream we can see mountains and houses and fences and people and all these sorts of things. They occur in the dream, but in reality they are not there. In reality, these appearances are not separate from our mind in any way. And it is the same way when we are awake. There are the occurrence and the appearance of mountains and mountain streams and plains and fences and everything like that. But these are just appearances that occur within our own mind. So if you examine your own mind carefully, there is nothing to identify. And rest in just the nature of that. So we look at the nature of the mind. And when we look at the nature of the mind, we can't really say, oh, that is the clarity. We can't really say, oh, that's the essence. There's nothing there that we can identify in the nature of our mind. And when we can't identify, then that is exactly what we look at. That is exactly what we just rest within. So rest in the nature of that. If you keep looking hard, at the same time as there's nothing to identify, it is not just absolute nothingness. So you look at it, but is that empty nature? Is it just absolute nothingness? It isn't. It's not like that. It's not an inanimate, empty, material emptiness. That is not how it is. While it is empty, it appears in various ways. So there is the clarity of the mind, or there are the appearance of external objects. But both of these are able to occur within our mind. So you experience this aware emptiness as raw, clear, vibrant, and direct. Rest easily in that which you do not know how to describe. And so when you rest in this and you see this empty essence is not just nothingness at all. It can appear in many different ways. And so you can experience this as clear, raw, clear, vibrant, and direct. You directly see it. And when you do that, you rest easily in that which you do not know how to describe. You cannot say anything about it in any way, and you just rest within that in equipoise. And so that is the seventh subject of focus.
Tene ta te la ta lontong la mikur dain yore la tene te tardo se du ngondro rombap nansang la mikur jobji ta tanda chitang ngondro rombap namsam ngoye ye te nambasom ye penan ngondro te la mikur jobji yore mikur jobji yobate hine la mikur chuchi lontong la mikur dain dambi mikur jobji yore teni ta te la chitang Shangpa Kagyu lama tamchi tsardun tensur ki cheprati sumare la chumbu lama ta chitang tanda soja chimbu ke dangwa ta nagu chudu ke dangwa te pedo den trangking ke lama tisore sena kedo chumbu nanjore kedo chumbu nanjore ke lama tisore sena teni yihi je khando ma nagu mare la teni teacher na teni kedo chumbo nanjurga lama nagume teni ngondro romba nasante zor zege yore yang kedo chumbo nanjurga chitanga jagarga lama jada ngachu tamba tembare sungi yore la lama jada ngachu ga nane ta lama zowo ten khandro ma naguma to sukhaside teni te yendo metri pa imbeche na metri pi kana zowo tangi yore se na ngui gela zor zege yore nguye romba nguye tanda nguye de la jianye rongzhol sinki de la zo nange yore tene ta te lama sumba te yihi jenkhandro ma sokha sadre la kedu chumbo nanjurga lama te kedu Soka Siddhiki Sola Tsor Nangi Yore Sena Ji Tene Kusum Ranghyar Ji Kusum Ranghyar Tela Tsor Ze Pasang Te Ngendru Kamdar Topa Che Guso Tate Ngendru Rombat Nasang Katik Tela Nyamsu Nyone Tal Huantong Katay Hini Katay Te Nyi Tsardo Tene Gomna Tini topa chegre la, tini topa che topa che gogre so.
And so in this way, we've had 7 subjects of focus for insight meditation. So in this way, there are 18 subjects of focus for the preliminaries, the threefold letting go, or the threefold natural settling. And so within these, we first have had these instructions on the preliminaries, the threefold letting go. Then there will also be the instructions on the actual practice, and then the instructions on the follow-through. And of these, for the preliminaries, there are the 18 subjects of focus. There are the instructions on the 11 subjects of focus on tranquility meditation, and the 7 subjects of focus on insight meditation, for a total of 18 subjects of focus. Now, different masters of the Shangpa Kagyu lineage stressed different types of teaching. So the tradition of the Shangpa Kagyu comes primarily from Chumpo Neljor, who brought the instructions on Mahamudra and the 6 yogas of Niguma back to Tibet. So it was Chumpo Neljor who brought these instructions back to Tibet. But who were Chumpo Neljor's lamas? Well, Chumpo Neljor's main lama was the Wisdom Dakini Niguma. And so from Niguma he stressed the threefold letting go, or the threefold naturally settling. So he primarily received those instructions from her. But actually, Chumpo Neljor had 150 lamas in India. And of these, there were 3 primary ones. There were the Wisdom Dakinis, Niguma, and Sukhasiddhi, and there was also the yogin Maitripa. And so Sukhasiddhi primarily stressed the preliminaries. Niguma primarily stressed the preliminaries, and Maitripa primarily stressed the actual practice, which is the natural liberation of the 4 faults. His third main lama, Chumpo Neljor's third main lama, was the Wisdom Dakini Sukhasiddhi. And she primarily stressed the follow-through. The follow-through is the natural occurrence of the 3 bodies. So she primarily stressed those instructions. So in this way, so here we've been talking about the preliminaries, and during the period of the preliminaries, you should develop realization. So in these instructions of the threefold letting go, or the threefold natural setting, during this period we have the instructions on insight, and we have the instructions on tranquility. And if we put emphasis on these instructions, we need to be able to develop realization. We can develop realization. We need to be able to develop realization from these instructions. And so that is enough for this morning, and let us do a little bit of meditation. Bala